today what I want to do is I want to transition from monochrome to color photography with covering the basics of color correction. And then we're going to wrap up with making a print, going over the print dialog box with you today. And then we're not going to have any more lecture material this week. We're going to use the remaining classes of today and all of Wednesday for you to get out and photograph and practice implementing these techniques that we're covering. Okay, so I know we're a lot of heavy lifting early on in order to gain the basic skills and to expose you to all these basic skill sets with the idea that I want to get you as much time to practice in the field of doing really good digital photography. And I just want to encourage you to stay driven, stay focused, stay motivated, because if you want to make a living, if you want to do this for a career, guess what? You're going to need to be driven to excellence. And that means practice, just a lot of practice on that. All right, so you can see my Lightroom screen. I have this image from a portrait session. You'll notice it's a Nikon RAW file. It's an NEF file. And the thing I want to get across today, and it seems appropriate in light of yesterday was the Masters Golf Tournament, to really use golf as an analogy for digital photography and the relationship between Lightroom and Photoshop. And in golf, you win championships by driving the ball and getting it close to make a short putt. And if you can two-putt every green, you will win championship after championship. I think of photography, digital photography, being similar to that in that we use Lightroom as our driver. We use our Lightroom to get it close, and then we use Photoshop to fine-tune the image, okay? And so in this case, what I want to do is just go through a basic sequence in Lightroom and then bring it into Photoshop. So first thing I'm going to do is go to the profile, and if I don't have a camera-specific profile, I'll default to the portrait because this is a portrait image. And it's important to understand that when it comes to color correction, skin tones are the most difficult colors to correct for because human skin has the greatest variety of colors of anything that we see in our world. And so the portrait one is going to be a little less saturated and less contrasty as the vivid that a lot of us preset our camera profile to. A lot of us start out, we want to photograph landscape, we want super saturated colors, we want a little snap and contrast. I recommend that you set the profile appropriate to the subject matter and know that I can always add contrast later on when I get further down the road. But to begin with, I want to be working in either portrait mode, or if I have a camera specific, go ahead and use my camera specific portrait mode. And you'll notice that soften the image a little bit to allow for a little more skin color to show through. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to close my profile. And then the other thing that I will do is I will look, and this is a tough one because this image is a hard one to color correct by itself because there is no neutral subject in the background. I mean, you know, I could try the teeth and the shadows here, and that might get it a little bit closer, but I can tell you it's probably gone too far. And then to add to the challenge in this case is this was a photograph taken late in the day. You can tell by the angle of the sunlight coming across the face, and that's going to have a really warm color cast to it. So I'm going to just dial it in relatively as accurately as I can by eye and just play around with that white balance a little bit. I'm also going to play with my exposure just a little bit and maybe pull up a little bit. And then I can go ahead, and I'm not going to do any vignetting at this point. At this point, what I'm really going to focus on is getting it into Photoshop. I've got it reasonably well, in this case. And so I'll hit Command E and go into Photoshop. All right, let's try this now. Okay, so here we are, looking at the image here. Now, what I want to point out to you is that to begin with, I'm actually going to use an action that I've created that is available for you to download. And I'll make sure you learn how to access that from our course. Download a basic color correction action. And so that's what we're starting with today. It's just an automated approach to it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this action. And take a look at it before and after. Okay. And so it's brought out quite a bit of green color cast to it. And it's lowered the highlight range on there. So there's before, there's after. I gotta say the highlight mask worked pretty well. The color correction is good in terms of contrast, but maybe has gone a little bit too blue-green in here. And so what I will do is I will use this curves adjustment layer. I will lower the opacity on this image to where I think it looks reasonably good. So there's before, where it had a little bit of red, and there's after, and that is not bad. I might tone it down just a little bit more. Okay, just a little bit more there. And then I can go before and after, and I say, yeah, that looks reasonably good. But now I'm looking at the hair color in here, and this is where I have in this action this color balance adjustment layer that actually allows me to go into the highlight area, and I can tell you right now, this looks a little cyan to me. And so I'm going to just add a little bit of red into the cyan, or I'm going to add a little red back to reverse the cyan. And it looks like I might even need to go into my mid-tone areas just a little bit, just to bring back that natural sunset back to this image. So again, I can watch before. There it looks a little cyan, and here it looks just a little bit red. And I might want to just go ahead and back off just a little bit. And this is where I will tell you the way you learn color is by experimentation, okay? And for me to be able to just quickly turn this on and off, and you'll notice your eyes will be immediately fooled by color the first time you look at an image, because you're seeing projected, transmitted light tickling the rods and cones of my eyes, and it goes, wow, it looks great. And then on top of that, the human eye does something automatically, which it will white balance just about anything under any lighting circumstances. And so your mind initially will go, wow, that looks fine. But it's only through this process of experimentation that you recognize that, wait, maybe it doesn't look as good as it should. And in fact, I might even add just a little bit of yellow back into this, because this is a dried up yellow grass in the background in here. So there's before. See how blue-green that was? And there we were getting a little bit more of that sunset coloration on there. Does that make sense?
Can I have clothing?
So now I'm going to save this. And by saving it, I'm actually keeping all these layers together. And Lightroom is actually going to add this to my catalog automatically. This is why I love starting in Lightroom with a raw file and then bringing it into Photoshop and then saving it. Because what Photoshop and Lightroom will do together is it will save a TIFF file, a multi-layered TIFF file, to my Lightroom catalog and add it to that file. And then on top of that, let's go back into Lightroom. Well, I'm going to do one more thing real quick. No, actually, we'll just go ahead and I'll stop the share. I'm going to close this up. and show you how these programs now work together. So let me go back into Lightroom. So notice down here, the file I'm looking at is the TIFF file. There's the original raw file. I think the new file looks better, don't you?
Are we out of bananas?
Okay. But now I have the advantage of I can apply camera raw settings to this. And so I might add just a little bit of clarity to bring that up a little bit. And I might add just a little bit of vignetting. Under my effects panel here. Bring that down just a little bit. Now there's other things that I could do to this image. I could sharpen some other things in there, but I'm not going to worry about that for today. I just wanted to show you the relationship between Lightroom and Photoshop for color correction. Okay, so let's find another image. Here's a raw file. Okay, and I'm going to go through the same situation here. Now this is more of an editorial image and not a close-up on the face, so I'm less concerned about the portrait profile for this. But I will go into my profile, and typically for this kind of image, I will use a neutral. You can just see how it's changing the color and the contrast by using this profile. So I'm just going to go with something neutral to begin with, and I'll close that. And now I'm going to take my eyedropper tool, and this is what we're going to talk about today to really teach what color correction really means. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the eyedropper, and right now it's actually fairly neutral. I've got 53.2 red, 52.9 green, 51.9 blue. And I have to say my camera did a really nice job of color correction in camera. Using, in this case, I was lighting LED bicolor lights that were set for daylight white balance. And so if I hit that and neutralize it, I'm seeing very little difference. But that image is actually in pretty nice shape, just straight out of the camera with good white balance on that. Okay. So actually, I don't really see a whole lot of things happen to that image other than I'm going to crop it. I'll probably crop it to a 5:7 proportion, and I'll probably come in here just a little bit closer, because if your photos aren't good enough, it's because you're not close enough. And so one of the ways we can enhance our image is by cropping it just a little bit tighter. And I like to use the cropping overlays to decide where important parts of the image meet on these what we call our rule of thirds power lines, if you will, right? So I can just bring that over just a little bit. And I might go ahead and just add just a little bit of vignetting. I vignette just about every image a little bit, just because it brings the eye into the frame. And you notice there was a little bit of flare in the upper left corner of the image that I wanted to kind of tone down just a little bit. Okay. So that's looking pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and open this in Photoshop. Actually, I don't need to open it in Photoshop. What am I talking about? I'm going to show you how to make a print. So first thing I'm going to do is get back into Lightroom. One of the things I wanted to go over today was getting into Lightroom and using the print module. So this is cropped to a 5:7. So just remember we cropped it to 5:7. And for your exhibition prints, I'm only asking for 8:10 exhibition prints. And the idea is that we want to put a 5:7 on an 8:10. And what's nice about that is if you want to give this to a gift to somebody, they can buy a mat that has a 5:7 opening that fits in a ready-made 8:10 frame really easily. And so I really like to give friends and family and my clients solutions to their problems. I don't want to create new ones. And so asking somebody, here's an 8x12, the camera proportion, go find an 8x12 frame. That's a little bit problematic. Amy, you're laughing.
I don't know what I did to make this happen.
What's that?
My screen is like this big.
Oh,
right
just
here.
maximize it.
Okay. Yeah, that's not it. That's just
The green button on top.
there isn't mine.
All right, we'll pause this for a minute.
I'm sorry. I don't know.
Where's your mouse? Did you connect your laptop to this computer?
No.
Really? Because there's something going on. You are streaming.
I don't even know what I did.
Yeah, you've got something going on your screen. Oh, there we go. Whoa. Yeah, you've got something going on to where you've got some Bluetooth thing going on. I don't even know what that is. Well, look on with somebody else for now. I'm not sure what's going on with the fact that you can move this, but what I was seeing in here is yeah, you have some sort of I don't know what that is going on. I honestly don't know at this point. So just follow along and you'll have the video to go back to. Okay, so just to reiterate, I need to crop my image, and I like to do this in Lightroom because it allows me to recrop for if a client wants an 8x10. I can go back and recompose the image for an 8x10. If the client wants a 5x7, I can compose it for a 5x7, but I'm not actually doing anything to my original file, okay? So in this case, I'm gonna crop it to a 5x7, and now I'll go to my print module, and I will go to my page setup, and I'm going to manage custom sizes. So most paper comes 8.5 by 11, but we're actually wanting to make this for an 8x10, which is a very affordable print size to order from a photo finishing lab or print on your inkjet printer at home or here in the lab. So I'm going to manage custom sizes, and I'm going to add a new size, and I'm going to make this 8 inches by 10 inches, and I'm going to double click on this to rename this 8x10 so I understand what it is I've done. And I will go ahead, and these basic margins are pretty standard for a lot of printers. Need a little more space on the bottom of the page to grab. Really not going to matter for this because we're going to actually export this and print on 8.5 by 11 paper, but we're going to have an 8x10 border on it. So I'm going to go ahead and define this as 8x10. I'm going to define it as a vertical. And I'm going to turn off my, well, I'll leave the nameplate for now, but I'll deal with the fact that what I want is a 1x1. And I want it to be I want to set it up ideally is 7x7 on here. And let me tell you why that is. By setting up for 7x7, if I change this to, if this was a horizontal image, it would still show up just fine. So by setting a square of 7 by 7, 7 being the longest dimension, I can handle a 5 by 7 horizontal or vertical, and then I just need to change my page setup to a horizontal without having to change my layout. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get my nameplate and turn off the rotation and grab that. And this is the way I want you to prepare something for an assignment. So we want to go ahead and put your name in the lower right corner. And now what we're going to do is we're not going to print directly from Lightroom. In fact, I really recommend we only print from Photoshop to ensure maximum color quality. Most of the time, what we do is we export from Lightroom and upload to the lab. In this case, I'm going to export by printing to file just this one image that will then print from Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and print to file. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to go through here and make sure I'm going to print a JPEG. I'm going to set it to 300 pixels per inch, just a generic resolution for most prints that we work with. It's a safe one to work with. And I'm going to make sure I'm printing to a sRGB profile. Going back to what we talked about the first week of the quarter about color spaces, the camera is set to a Pro Photo RGB color space, which has a huge range of colors that it can display through the transmitted light. Now I'm getting ready to print something to paper, and paper has a far lower range of colors that it can produce. So what I want color management to do is to export into that smaller color space so that it does what's called that color lookup table. It translates the broad color space to the color space that is compatible with printing. It's also compatible with web browsers. So I use that sRGB for 2 reasons. 1, for when I'm getting ready to print. 2, whenever I'm creating a file for social media, because the web browsers have a limited range of color profiles that they're compatible with. Everybody is standardized on sRGB. So if I export an sRGB that I've converted first, it will display properly on a web browser, social media, my cell phone, as well as on anybody else's device, because sRGB is like this universal translated profile. So I want to set my resolution. I want to set my sRGB profile, and then I'll hit print to file, and I will just name this my Gardner 5.7 exhibition, and I will save it. And I'm just going to save this to the desktop right now, and I'll just create a new folder called printing demo. Okay, so now I'm going to go into Photoshop, so I'm going to stop share. I'm going to open that file, and then I'll start my share again. Okay, so now in this case, I'm looking at this image, and I am going to do one thing real quick, just because I think I could bring up just a little bit more brightness on it. So I'm actually going to do what I shared last week. I'm going to create a duplicate layer, and I'm going to change it to screen mode. See how that brightens it up? And I'm going to lower the opacity. Okay, and I got to tell you, that looks better to me, right? Doesn't that look better? I'm going to draw more of the viewer's eye by having that a little bit brighter on there. So using that screen mode lightens things up proportionally while maintaining the color saturation. The other thing I'm going to do is, because I am wanting to trim this to an actual 8 by 10, but it's going to print on 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, I'm going to create a border on this image. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a new layer, and let's call this image border. And I just want to tell you, I do this all the time in my studio downtown, where I'm printing up something. For example, I have a printer that prints 17-inch by 22-inch sheets of paper. And so, for example, I had an exhibition recently that I needed to have something that fit into a 16 by 20 frame. Well, very difficult to know where to cut the paper if it's just a white border around an image. So what I'm showing you is something that I do all the time in my work. And that is, I'm going to select all, and I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to use the stroke command to apply a black line. And the way I get black, by the way, is I click on the Show Web Colors. Web Colors is only 256 colors, and I know that this is going to be just pure black without me having to do any trouble right there. So I'm going to just go ahead and stroke it, and I generally will use the outside. And now what's going to happen if I hide this, I hit Command H, by the way, to hide, and the first time you do that, it says, what do you want Command H to mean? In my case, I'm saying hide the marching ants of my selection. And if I were to just show you what this would look like, if I extended this out to 8.5 by 11, should have seen, maybe I did it wrong. Tell you what, I'm gonna hit stroke. I'll edit the video to make this look perfect. It'll be like a Martha Stewart thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this, I'll do the center line. So if I now make this an 8.5 by 11, just to show you what this would look like. Now I see my border on my screen. You see that? So that's what it's going to look like on my paper. Now I'm going to undo that because I'm only going to print the 8 by 10 on here. So now I've got a border that's very easy for me to line up with a paper cutter and know where my lines are to cut without having to measure. Does that make sense? Okay. So now the big thing I want to show you is how do I make a print. And so I'm going to go to File, Print. And in this case, we are using something called a RIP, which, you know, in popular culture means rest in peace, but in our vernacular, it actually means a rasterized image processor. When you're working in a large organization where you're sharing one printer across multiple computer workstations, you need a dedicated computer to manage all the data, all the files coming in. In the case of our computer lab here at the college, we use a raster image processor so that Robin doesn't print anything out. We don't just keep reams of paper loaded in the printer so that anybody that hits print spits out a print. He actually manages that print to make sure that it's got the right settings as a second fail-safe. So what I need to do first is change my horizontal layout to a vertical layout, and you can see now that I have that box that's going to be right there. And here's the key. Some of you will have a screen that says printer manages color. We don't want to use that for optimum color reasons. We want Photoshop to translate the colors for the printer using a specific printer profile. So we're going to go down and look through the list of profiles, and this is where we find out that since we aren't connected directly to our printer, we have to use the generic sRGB profile. And what will happen on the other end is the raster image processor. Let's go back to Photoshop. Normally, if we were printing, and this was our own inkjet printer, we would see a printer driver, right? Normally, we would see a color profile that would be named by our printer. So we would see like Epson glossy paper, Epson matte paper, Epson whatever it is. If you're using an Epson printer, if you're printing to a Canon printer, you would see a list of Canon color profiles. Because it's very important to note that whatever printing device you're printing through, the substrate affects the color of your image. Believe it or not, printing a matted paper will give a different color than printing to a glossy because it tells the printer how much ink to put on the paper. So it'll affect the darkness, it'll affect the color shift of it, because for each pixel of information, it's laying down 4 colors in a CMYK color space.
So is glossy darker than matte, or is matte darker than glossy?
Actually, glossy is going to have the brightest contrast and print range of any paper stock. Matte paper will always be dull and low contrast. What I'm talking about here is more about making sure we put the right amount of ink on the paper based upon the amount of absorption that is happening because of the surface of paper. So glossy paper has very little absorption, so very fine amounts of ink get put on that paper. You actually can use a little less ink to get your black on a glossy paper because it's not absorbing like a paper towel. Whereas a matte paper, that ink gets absorbed into the surface of that paper and it spreads out and gets a little lower contrast. Okay, so just letting you know that this is where we set our profile. And when you go up to Robin at the front desk, he'll ask you what kind of paper you want. And what he will do is in that rip, he will actually set the paper stock, and that sRGB will get translated to the proper profile. So he manages that for us here. But if you're printing at home and using your own printer, you would actually set for the appropriate profile based on your printer. That's why when you get a printer, you download printer drivers that communicate to the printer and communicates the paper profiles or the color profiles that go with that particular device using what we call color lookup tables. That's that clip that we talked about in the first quarter. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and print this. So the same image file printed on 2 different paper surfaces looks very, very differently. So it's really important to use the right printing profile for the image. In this case, the glossy looks a lot better overall. What happens is there's so many shadows on this particular image that the matte paper really blocks up the shadows, so I would actually need to lighten that up a little bit further. But overall, the colors look really good. And that's the point I want to get across, is that you need to do experimentation. You need to look at before and after. You need to use color management to work with your image file. And I think you need to, in my case, the way I work is I have a printer at home, and I will process a batch of images, and I will export contact sheets, and I'll bring some in next week I'll bring in some, and I'll show you that I print out a contact sheet before I ever upload it to a photo finishing lab or upload it to my website for a client to download. I've actually tested the file before I upload it to deliver it to my client or to put it up on my e-commerce site for people to order prints, because the print looks very different from the computer screen if we haven't done our color management correctly. Okay, and there's so many things that can go wrong with our eyes based on fatigue, time of day, ambient room light, that I want to make sure that we understand what color balance actually is. And so I'm going to hit the pause button here. Okay, so we're now in Module 2, and our focus for Module 2 is color correction. One of the resources that I think is incredibly important for you to read and review is this article that is actually an excerpt from a book written several years ago by Ben Wilmore called Color Correction by the Numbers. And so I actually scanned the pages that are most important for you to read. And you should put this in your class notebook, because this is going to really help you understand what color correction by the numbers really means. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share. I just want to highlight where that is in our class. And next week, we'll do some more color correction work. And I want to point out that in my camera bag, always take a color calibration target to photograph it. If you want to make life simple for yourself, you want to photograph a color, either a gray card at a minimum or a Macbeth color chart, because it makes color correction automated compared to doing it any other way. So here's an image I did. This was an engagement portrait session down in LA at Redondo Beach, as a matter of fact, one of my favorite childhood haunts. And what I want to point out is that I can get my info palette open. And I can see my RGB numbers, and immediately what I look for in any photograph, if this was a landscape image, I'd be looking for some gray rock in the scene, or in this case, because it's a beach, I know there's nothing neutral in the foreground here, but the subject is wearing a white shirt, and here's what I know about white. The shadows of white are gray. And so when I look at this area of the shirt, I see that there is a strong blue cast up here in the info palette. And so I can just bring this down here a little bit closer. And you can see right in here, I've got this really strong blue cast and a cyan cast. And the reason I know there's a cyan cast is because the lowest number is red. And so an absence of red means that I have more of its opposite on the color wheel. And so that would be cyan. Right? And so the opposite of green would be magenta, the opposite of blue would be yellow. And so this is an image that I can tell you needs some yellow and it needs some red to balance this out a little bit. So I'm going to come in here, and first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to experiment with a curves adjustment layer. And I'll take the gray sample, and I will actually take it down into the shadow area here, just probably right in there, and click on that. Now that's going way overboard, but look at how the shirt looks really white. See how neutral that shirt looks? But it's terrible for the skin, so it's gone too far. And so I can lower the opacity of this a little bit, and that actually looks pretty good. Okay, there's before. See how blue and cyan it is, and here we've warmed it up because this actually is a bright sunny day. You get the blue-green of the ocean there. You get the kind of yellow sand. He's wearing tan pants, and that's reflecting light. And so that would be one way to do this. However, I'm going to show you another way to do color correction. We're going to do it by the numbers. And what I'm going to do first is I am going to select with my eyedrop sample tool, which is, where is my eyedrop sample tool? There it is, right here. Right here, underneath this, I have not just an eyedropper tool, but I have a color sampler tool. And what I'm doing with the color sampler tool is I'm creating some spots where I know I want to see on the info palette what that is as I'm making adjustments. And so I'm going to select these areas in here. And what I'm also looking for, so I'm looking for a highlight with full texture, which is going to be up on this collar. I'm going to look for a middle gray value, and I'm going to look for a shadow value. In this case, I will say that the darkest neutral thing I might have is her hair up here, and I might actually select this area right in here a little bit, and that's why having a Macbeth color chart would make this whole lot easier. I could look for something maybe down in here if that was a neutral gray up here. I'm not trusting it. I might try there. That actually looks like that should be gray. So I don't want black. I want a dark shadow value, but something that should be neutral. And so I can see these three sets of numbers for these three spots here. When I'm looking at these numbers, I am going to take the two closest numbers and average them together to set up an optimum neutral value. So in this case, 210 and 188 are the closest, and the blue is 251. It's out of gamut. It's too much. So if I average the two numbers here of 210 and 188, That's a gap of 22. And so I'm going to meet somewhere in the middle, which would be 11. So I'm going to add 11 to 188 to come up with 199. I'm going to set my red and green values to 199. I will tell you the difficulty here is that the shirt is going to have a blue cast. If I neutralize it to 199 all the way, it's going to be problematic. But let's go ahead and experiment with this. New adjustment layer, curves. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the individual channel for the red, and I'm going to separate out my info palette so I can see these numbers here. And what I'm going to do is on the red, I'm going to just click on it somewhere in here, and I actually want to, why am I not, there we go. Here's my input. My input, I want to set it to the 188 that matches my sample, and I'm going to set my out point to 199. And didn't that do a nice job already? Let's look at before and after. That is already adding a little bit more warmth to the shirt. Now I'm going to go to the green channel, and I'm going to click on here, anywhere on this green curve, and I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to take 210, and I'll drop it down to 199. And that's going to bring a little bit more magenta back in. And then we've thrown our blue off a little bit. We're going to click on that, and I'm going to hit 251, and I'm going to output. I'm going to do this knowing that's way too far. This is not going to. Experience tells me this would be way too far, and that is way too far. So I'm just going to pull a little bit from this, go down to 239. And what that's happening, you'll see that's actually kind of pulling. I need to adjust this curve a little bit here, but that's okay. We'll come back to it. I'm going to go to my next point, which is 162. And in this case, the two closest are, again, the 162 and the 138. So that's a gap of, what, about 24. So I'll subtract 12 in here. Actually, that should be 224. Yeah, this is kind of, this is not the best target for me to work with. So let's just, I'll take that off and just bring this back in here. I'll go back to my red here. So I'm going to go ahead and 138. Get a second point here, 138. And we are going to add, what did we say we were adding? 12. So that would be what, 150? There we go. And then we'll go to our green channel. And we're at 162. And we'll go to 150. Okay. Sometimes we just have a challenge on our hands with a color crossover because of a reflecting quality on here. I'm going to go down to the shadows, 37, 43, 55. And so the two closest there are going to be, again, the green and red. There's a 6 difference there, so I'll split the middle on the third one. So here I'm on the green channel, so I'll go, this is 43, and I'll go down to 40. And then the reds, I'll go from 37 and go to 40, which actually did that automatically. So I'm pretty close there. It's really this blue channel that's just all out of whack. So I'm just going to actually limitate that just a little bit and just bring that in a little bit. And so I'm getting a little bit of yellow in the shadow, but I'm still keeping a blue there. Anytime there's a gap of greater than 20 between these two numbers, I know I really just will never have a true neutral. But let's take a look before, after. Quite a bit better. We do need to brighten up the image. And so in this case, when I don't want to change the overall color, and I just want to change the overall brightness without changing color, I'll use the levels command. Because that's not going to, I can go ahead and open up all the colors a little bit. And in this case, I'm going to take advantage of the layer mask. I'm going to invert that layer mask to make it black because I want to keep kind of a natural vignetting. And I'm going to paint white where I wanted that brightening up to happen. So I'm just going to set my opacity to 100. And then back up just a little bit. So now let's take a look at that. I'm going to group these layers together. So I've selected both of these layers. We don't need this layer. I'll throw that out. Oops, I just threw out a layer mask. Throw out that. So now I want to see before and after, and that can be done by grouping. So I can go to Layer and Group Layers. And now they're grouped together, so one toggle, there's before, there's after. What do you think? Better? Okay. I think that looks a lot better, actually. Now, at this point, I'm ready to take it the next step, which is to select all, copy, merge. I'm going to paste it. So now I've got kind of my starting point. I'll even paste it a second time. And now I will go into my camera raw filter. And I'm going to add a little bit more shadow. See how that's pulling out the hair texture a little bit? Okay. And I'll actually add a little bit of vignetting back into it. And I might add just a little bit of, not contrast, but clarity to increase the mid-tone contrast. There we go. Just a little bit there. So let's look at before and after now. Good. Oops. That's about good there. And move that out of the way. So there's, see how we just brought out that hair texture in there? So this is before I even deal with any skin retouching. I'm not going to talk about that today. We'll save this image for next week. We'll get into skin retouching. But right now, I just want you to see that I did all this color correction really by analyzing numbers and not just trusting my eyes. It was a combination of informed decision based upon the numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I think that looks pretty nice on here. Okay. I'm going to bring up one more image. See if I can find one more image that will actually work the way I would like it to for this demo. The image that would work the best is one that's unfortunately not very sharp. Oh, I've got a good image here. Okay. Let's see there. Yeah, let's just work with this image right here. We've played with this once before. So I'm just going to focus on color. You can still see the image now, right? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my, step one would be to grab my color sampler tool, which is right here. And remember, the reason we use the color sampler tool is because it allows me to set some points that I'm analyzing the color and it's staying on here, whereas as you move your cursor with just a regular eyedropper tool, everywhere you move, the numbers are changing. So I want to fix those locations. So this is a white birch bark, and I know white that is in shadow should be a neutral gray, and I know that really dark shadows should also be very neutral, okay? And so I can click on these, and now I can look at my color palette, and see that my highlight is pretty neutral, 144, 146, 147. I'm just going to center that at 146 and call it good. My second value is at 75, 80, 88. So really, I've got a gap there of 75 and 80 is closer together, so we'll average at about 77, 78 in there. And we can see that we have a blue cast in the shadows. And then if we go down to our shadows, we got 42, 44, and again, we got that blue cast, but it's within tolerance. Remember, when it comes to analyzing your numbers, when you've got one number that is more than 20 points beyond the next close set of numbers, then we know that we're never going to pull that all the way in, that really should have a color shift in that direction. But if we're within 10 values, 10 to 20 range, we can get pretty close and know that we can neutralize that color. So let's just do this manually with using the curves adjustment layer. And I'm just going to go ahead and start with my reds, and I'm going to start with my highlights. In this case, I've got my averaging out my 144 is just going to go barely up to 145, just barely. My second set of numbers is going to go from 75 to 78. And my third number is going to go from 42, and we're going to settle on 43. Okay? And so you can see these numbers kind of neutraling out. And let's just see what that did, by the way. Let's look before. You can see it warmed up the image already, which you'd expect some warm coloration in this foliage right here. So now I'm going to go to my green channel, and I'm going to click here, and that's starting at a 146, and we're going to drop that to a 145, even that out. Very subtle change there. And look what's happening. That 80 already dropped down to 79 because those colors were so close already. The camera did a good job of capturing that scene in a neutral, which means I had the white balance set correctly for the color temperature of the light. It's already very neutral. So I just have to make a subtle adjustment here, going from 80 to 78, and to neutralize that. Now we'll go through the blues, and our first blue value in the highlight is at 147. Hardly any adjustment at all to go down to 145. That's just 2 points. And then our second set of numbers is going from 88. And we're going to try the 78. And that seems to be okay. Look at that. It's neutralized. And you'll know if you're out, if you've pushed it too far, because it'll pull this previous highlight value out of neutral. But as I'm doing this, I'm seeing it staying locked in at 145. What the info palette does when I've used the color sampler, it shows me before and after adjustment numbers. And so the left-hand side is what was before. The right-hand side is what the adjustment is making to it. And so now, look at this. The 53 is already almost within our color area that we want. So I'm just going to plug that in, 53, and I'll go to 44. And now I can tweak this. Or no, we wanted 43 on that, didn't we? There we go. So I'm really, really close. I've got a slight 1 point loss of green there. So I'm going to click on the green and just come down here. $44, $43. There we go. So now everything is neutral. And let's just move this out of the way. Let's back this up. There's before. Very blue. There's after, where it's got the neutral. Now, we're not addressing saturation. We're not addressing contrast at this point. Okay? And in this case, I've adjusted my color. Now I'm going to go ahead and adjust my overall contrast. And I will tell you that a lot of people advocate that you use the curve adjustments for both of these. I actually prefer to use levels for this, and this is just me. The reason I say that is when I'm manually adjusting colors, I don't want to take the chance of throwing any of them out of whack. And so by using the levels, I'm able to hold down my Option key, come in here, and remember that holding down the Option key shows me the clipping, and I can see where I can come all the way in. I'm just starting to get some clipping right there, and I can pull in and start to see a little bit of dark shadows, and voila. Before, after, and I have not changed any of the color corrections I've made. So let's group these two layers together by shift-clicking, layer, group layers, and look at the before and the after. So I have color corrected and adjusted the contrast of my image, what we call by the numbers. So the way we color correct an image is we look for a neutral highlight, a neutral shadow, and a neutral midtone. And we neutralize each of those 3 points on the curve. We don't want to neutralize a bunch of points on that curve because it'll throw it out of whack. But if we can grab a known highlight, a known shadow, and a midtone and neutralize those 3 areas, our overall color correction will be extremely accurate because all those colors are like connected to a rubber band. If I adjust one here, it's going to pull the others with it a little bit. And so if I have 3 points of contact, I like to think about rock climbing as a metaphor, where you want to have 3 points of contact when you're rock climbing. If I have 3 points of contact on my curves adjustment layer and I can neutralize that, I can get excellent color rendition by the numbers. All right, so we've covered a lot today. We've used an automatic setting. We've used Lightroom with the color profile camera, as well as the white balance tool for adjusting color. We've brought it into Photoshop to further refine it, and hopefully what you've seen is that each layer adds a little better overall quality to it, that I get the very best quality working on an image in Photoshop, but the automated tools help me be efficient. And so you have to just kind of pick and choose at what point do I need to offer custom quality, and what point do I need to have good enough in terms of a good starting point. And for me, what that means is I want to do what I describe to my clients is I do basic color correction and tone mapping in Lightroom. I export it. I share those proof images with my clients to allow them to pick which ones I will actually do the final edits on and deliver to the client. So I go through a 2-step process with my clients where I am showing them the Lightroom corrected, basic automated color correction, and then they pick which images that I do the final correction in, and that's always in Photoshop. Okay, always in Photoshop. All right, that's what I have for you today. What I'm going to encourage you to do is spend some time either getting caught up on finishing up the monochrome, getting maybe a print made today. If you haven't done one, just to experiment with making a monochrome print, and I can help you. It would be a good idea for you to have me to look at your image file before printing it so you don't waste money and waste paper, because it's just one of those things, you know, this looks good on the screen, but it looks so much better when I print it up, didn't it? And that made all the difference on the print. And that's the part that I want to help you with the experience factor with. Okay, so work on assignments, work on getting a print made. Wednesday will be complete lab day where I'm going to encourage you to go out and photograph looking for color. Okay, looking for color. And I'm going to let you choose where you go for that. I would encourage you to check out a gray card and to photograph a gray card. Because the way the gray card or Macbeth color chart, the way the gray card, if you have a Macbeth color chart, I've got a highlight swatch, I've got a shadow swatch, I've got a middle gray swatch. Guess what? I can use the automated tools and get very good color if I have a known target. What I demonstrated today is when you don't have a target, you have to use your experience to figure out where to look in that scene for neutral values. But if I have a target, I just take a test exposure, I can automate all three of those adjustments and be extremely accurate so I can get the best of both worlds. So that's the other reason when I'm showing stuff to my clients, it's really, really close because I'm always shooting a Macbeth color chart, calibrating that in Lightroom.
Your camera automatically, if you take a shot of that, then it.
No, the camera won't do it automatically. In my case, I've got a special software that I'll do a video demo of over the next week and show you what that is. But what I am telling you is that I can easily use my auto color to quickly grab those three spots and then sync it. I correct one image and I sync it to the rest that have the same exposure.
So if you take the picture of that and have the corrections on that,
then you can apply it to the rest of the images. So one perfect image can be applied to the rest of them that have the same exposure and lighting conditions.
okay.
And I'll go over that. I'm going to be working on tutorials. So what I'm going to be doing on Wednesday is I'm going to be working on some more tutorials about color management and how in the real professional world, we have software that's specially dedicated for automating this calibration process that I'm teaching you how to do manually. So I'm going to work on that. What I want you to do is go out and photograph, and then we will spend all next week working on making color corrections and color prints. Does that make sense?